Let's be honest. America didn't become a place where someone could snap their fingers and a major website like Parler.com could just disappear overnight. There were a lot of steps that had to be taken between everything should be allowed to be on the internet and we should just shut someone down because something happened that we don't like. Along the way, some of those steps had to be created and ushered along by people who were simultaneously pretending to support free speech while actually cleverly disguising their arguments in such ways so that you wouldn't notice that they were anti-free speech. Is that really possible? Yeah, it is. There are a lot of people who I believe are sincere. I think Jimmy Dore is sincere. I think Ben Shapiro is sincere. I think Tim Pool is sincere. There are many others as well. But then there are a lot of people who I think are insincere, and unfortunately they're good at fooling people. I've used Krystal Ball and Saagar Enjeti as punching bags before, and I will again, because I think that they personify the type of fake liberalism or fake anti-establishmentism that is so prevalent in society and actually ushers us a little bit further along every time towards that cliff. It's unbelievable how much in one video Saagar manages to get wrong about the situation regarding Parler, and how dangerous his suggestions are, but they're cleverly disguised in such a way. He takes the premise that if you don't follow my ideas, nothing could be done. Only by following what I'm telling you, only by doing what I suggest, could we ever hope to achieve some good outcome. And so you're stuck with whatever I'm telling you. But his logic is so twisted and flawed. And what's even more interesting is the response of Krystal Ball. She should outright reject it. She claims to be a liberal and anti-establishment. We'll go through it together. But instead, she accepts his premise. It's very sad because people like Jimmy Dore, who are sincere, they seem to fall for it too. He seems to think that Krystal Ball is legit. But you know what? You don't have to take my word for it. We're going to go through a video of Krystal and Saagar together. You're going to see for yourself how wrong he is as we take apart his arguments carefully and rationally and calmly. This is The Eye of the Storm, and I'm Laser Weiss. I want you to remember something. The goal is to carefully analyze things. So he'll say things very quickly, very rapidly, and I'm going to play the video at faster speeds. If you want to watch the original, I'll have a link. But the goal is to really analyze what he's saying and not just accept the words because he says it in a way that is filled with conviction and sounds smart. So without further ado, let's begin.
This weekend, it was one of those where it feels like the news is unrelenting, that it's difficult, even with just 2 days in review, to sum it all up. By now, I'm sure you all at least have a vague understanding of what has happened. Beginning Friday, Twitter banned President Trump, permanently citing his past tweets, encouraging storming the U.S. Capitol, and his initial response to those riots. That set fire to the discourse as to whether big tech had too much power over our lives. Here, we have a private company decided to deplatform the sitting, albeit outgoing, president of the United States. But that conversation had gasoline poured on it as the weekend progressed with the fate of Twitter alternative Parler. Parler has been touted by conservatives in recent months after billing itself as the real free speech platform that does not exercise bias moderation.
Now, to be fair, we do need to have a discussion about President Trump's Twitter ban. But we'll save that for a different video. So let's just go on.
Parler came under major scrutiny over the weekend as it became increasingly clear that its users organized and called for much of the violence that transpired in the Capitol building on Wednesday, leading within a span of about 24 hours to its essential banishment from the internet.
Now, I want to just point out something. Tone of voice is often important to convey an impression. You would think that Saagar should be on the side of Parler. Why? Because Parler was an open app that supported free speech. This is not like some secret. The fact that, let's say, as I'll indicate, Nazis and other people can utilize free speech doesn't change the fact that they are what they say they are. But his tone of voice, which I'm going to slow down the video for so you could really hear it, seems to indicate that you should have a negative impression going into his reporting. Why would he do that? What's the benefit in for him to making it sound like they're bad up front?
Those riots. That set fire to power over our lives. Here, we have a private company deciding to deplatform the sitting, albeit conversation had gasoline. The fate of Twitter alternative Parler. Parler has been touted by
Listen to what he says. Parler has been touted by conservatives
in recent months after billing itself as the real free speech platform.
Parler has billed itself as the real free speech. Why is he saying it like that? We know that Twitter is not a real free speech platform. Why is he saying it in this like weird, strange tone of voice? I know that I'm harping on this, but again, every nuance here is important. If I was reporting on it, I would say Parler, which billed itself as a platform that promotes free speech, and mostly seemed to live up to that promise, by the way. But the taking on of a clowny aspect is unnecessary. And if I'm harping on it for good reason. Because this entire video is an act. Let's get more into it and you'll see.
That does not exercise bias moderation. Parler came under major scrutiny over the weekend as it became increasingly clear that its users organized and called for much of the violence that transpired in the Capitol building on Wednesday, leading within a span of about 24 hours to its essential banishment from the internet. In one fell swoop, Parler was banned from the Google Play Store, not available on Android, it's banned from Apple App Store, not available on iPhone, and Amazon, who hosts all of its content on its servers, said they would no longer do so. In effect, they have ceased to exist. This ignited the most fierce conservative debate about the free market in modern memory. Much of it, of course, was me saying, I told you so. Just go build your own Twitter, right? Wrong. Well, since only 2 companies control almost every device in America and they decide that they don't like it, you can't. Also, good luck hosting it on the internet when the main web service administration decides, nah, we don't like you. So what are the lessons to be learned? There are 3, I think. First and foremost is the most obvious. There are probably no bigger fools today than the libertarians who welcome unaccountable content moderators in Silicon Valley, removing the president of the United States today and deciding that an app cannot exist, period, because they find it objectionable. All of their defense of how the free market protects individual liberty better than anyone else has been shown, at least in the field of technology, to be utterly and completely false through this episode. Second, though,
what is he talking about? We need to really deconstruct what he just said. Okay? I'm going to play it again slowly, and we're going to pause throughout, and we're going to show you how every premise he takes on here is wrong, and how pretty much almost everything he says is just outright completely baloney. So let's go through it slowly.
I told you so. Just go build your own Twitter, right? Wrong. Well, since only 2 companies control almost every device in America and they decide that they don't like it, you can't. Also, good luck hosting it on the internet when the main web service administration decides, nah, we don't like you. So what are the lessons to be learned? There are 3, I think.
Amazon certainly didn't decide we don't like you. That wouldn't be a valid reason to take them down. Maybe the private company thing would work to an extent, but there are terms of service. The reason Amazon was able to say that we're taking you down is because they claim they violated their terms of service by allowing violent content to be hosted. But now let's see how he gets into that.
First and foremost is the most obvious. There are probably no bigger fools today than the libertarians who welcome unaccountable content moderators in Silicon Valley, removing the president of the United States today and deciding that an app cannot exist, period, because they find it objectionable. All of their defense of how the free market protects individual liberty better than anyone else has been shown, at least in the field of technology, to be utterly and completely false.
All of their claims that the free market is the best moderator have been shown to be completely and utterly false, is what he says. The insanity of these remarks coming from somebody who says that he's an anti-establishment liberal cannot be stressed enough. What's the premise of his argument? The premise of his argument is, you can't build your own Twitter. You know why you can't build your own Twitter? Because if you try, and there's content on your site that a private company like Amazon Web Services doesn't like, they'll snap your fingers and they're gone. And even if you have your own service provider and your content can't be just vanished off the internet, Apple and Google, who control the internet essentially through their phone platforms and Google through their search platform, will just make sure that no traffic ever hits you. Now, that sounds compelling, what he's saying, until you realize something. That's not a free market problem. The government created this problem in the first place. This is actually the opposite of a free market. Now I'll explain. People don't really have a clear understanding of Section 230 and what it did. Section 230, essentially, and you can find much more in-depth videos about this, but the goal of Section 230 was to create a world where people could allow content to be hosted on the internet without having to worry about that content coming back to hurt them. So, for example, if I run a newspaper and I publish in that newspaper a story about how a teenager was mocking a Native American, and that story makes the teenager, who was a previously unknown private individual, famous, And for all the wrong reasons. He gets harassed, he gets death threats, he gets rejected from college, whatever. He takes some kind of other things. I'm just making up stuff here. But somehow his life gets impacted very negatively. And I, the owner of the newspaper, was wrong. I lied. Okay? Even if I told the truth, I'm not sure. But forget about why I should be allowed to. But forget about that. I clearly was wrong. Well, I'm responsible for that content. I put that content out there. And so now that boy could come and sue me. And I would have to deal with that. If you were running a website, like a search engine or some kind of a forum, a bulletin board forum, and the internet is growing, it's the 1990s, there's a lot going on, and somebody posts something and says, yo, we should go out and rob a bank. And it's very hard to monitor every piece of content. Well, people who ran internet sites were terrified of the liability that could come along with anybody posting anything they wanted anywhere. It's difficult to monitor every inch and every corner of your website. So the government said, we'll protect you from that. We will essentially, using this thing called Section 230, we will cause your internet platform to be treated sort of like a utility. And we have to really get a little bit into this for a second. If I make a phone call and I tell somebody, I say, hey, listen, I want you to kill my neighbor. I hate him. I will pay you $1 million to go and kill him. Right? Now, and the guy does it. Or we know that it's real. We find that it's right. And the guy attempts to. And we find that recording of the phone call. I committed a crime. I definitely committed a crime. I will go to jail. Right? Because I hired or tried to hire a hitman. The thing is, let's say I have AT&T. AT&T has no responsibility for that. We can't go to AT&T and say, hey, AT&T, you let this guy into your phone service line where he planned to commit a crime. And that's very different. What is this specifically different to? Let's say, for example, I went into someone's private home, and in his private home, I arranged a meeting with a hitman, and he knew about it, right? So I went into his home, and I met with the hitman. That guy also bears some responsibility because I'm using his house to arrange the committing of a crime. So he's party to my conspiracy, but AT&T is not. Right? Now, even so, we can use that recording, meaning we can take the recording of me, if we find it, on the phone, speaking to someone and arranging a hit. And we can use that in court against me. But AT&T has nothing to do with it. They're not considered an entity here, even though they're the ones who own the phone line. So we said, we're going to make the internet like that in order to protect the growth of the internet as it spirals out of control. So, because we can't reasonably expect people to be able to monitor every piece of content that's anywhere on their website. That's very reasonable, right? It's very reasonable. What are the terms of service for you to speak into your phone? What could you get in trouble for and what could you not get in trouble for? Think about it for a second. When you install a landline, besides for whatever the service contract is of you having to pay your bill, is there a terms of service agreement in terms of what you're allowed and not allowed to say? No. Why not? Well, because since it's a utility, that category of government operation means that it's essentially, they're not an entity in regards to your speech. So your speech would just be regulated by the law of the country you live in. Now, in this country, we have the First Amendment. So essentially, your terms of service agreement with, let's say, AT&T or Verizon or whoever your phone provider is if I say something that violates the First Amendment, you're not responsible, but I'll get taken to court. Well, it violates the First Amendment. I would say is not protected is probably a better way of saying it. Is that, you know what I mean? Meaning, if I say I say some disgusting racist remark that is inappropriate, or I say Jews are inferior, and we are whatever the master race, and whatever I say, it doesn't matter because I didn't break the law. Now, if I do break the law, that's something that I can be prosecuted for, even if I used AT&T. But AT&T is not an entity, a party to my breaking the law. So you know what your terms of service are? Your terms of service are, we, AT&T, have nothing to do with whatever you say. If you break the law, we're not involved. However, you're not covered. You can't use our platform to break the law. So if you break the law while speaking into your telephone lines, that's between you and the government, and our utility doesn't protect you, but we're not entity to it. That's basically your terms of service. You don't sign anything because it's basically the same thing as you speaking in public. Me talking to you over a telephone line is basically the same thing as me talking to you in person. Section 230 was in a perfect world supposed to make the internet sort of like that. But the government, they messed up. They threw in this little tiny thing there where they said, now, of course, you might want to moderate your website. So as long as you moderate your website in good faith, why does the government do this? They always step in it when they do things in a vague way. They say things like, as long as you in good faith, what is good faith precisely? There's not really a clear definition. Good faith means that I, somebody who's supposed to be a platform for content and not a publisher of content, right? So, for example, if I would buy my own telecom service, and every time you wanted to use my telecom service, I would say I'm only allowing you to talk on the telecom service if I approve of what you have to say, and also I control, all of the bits of data on it. I choose which ones go and which ones don't, right? So then, in theory, if you said something that was illegal and I allowed it to go through, then I would be party to your conspiracy, right? So the platform publisher distinction is, am I more like a utility, like a telephone, or am I more like a newspaper where I'm allowing things to be published? But you see, the good faith moderation clause, or call it whatever you will, allowed places like YouTube to say, no. We're a platform, but we want to monitor our platform so that it is a sanitized, lovely place to be. We're not doing that in contravention of the idea that we should be a utility. We're doing that in support of that, right? You see, it makes sense in a sort of rationalistic, almost like shallow way of thinking. There is a beauty to that. For example, when I talk to my fellow Nazi sympathizer on my phone, you know who's in that phone call? Me and the Nazi sympathizer. It's not like millions of people will accidentally be privy to that. When I post a video on YouTube, it could assault your eyeballs, theoretically. So let's say I was going to march in public and declare how wonderful Nazis are. You shouldn't have to see that, right? Now, of course, we know in America Nazis do have the right to march in public, and sadly, it's protected. I mean, sadly, in like a metaphorical way, it's sad that that happens. It's good that it's protected. But YouTube said, in good faith, we don't want people to have to be assaulted by things like that. That's not us being not a utility. That's us being faithful to goodness. So let's think for a second. Let's say that you went to a website called, YourTube. I just made that up. I don't know if it's a real website. Don't visit it. Who knows? It could be something bad. But let's say there was a website called YourTube. And YourTube, when you signed on, it said, terms of service. You agree that we will not moderate any content on this website. If you do anything illegal that's not protected by the First Amendment, you might get arrested, just like you would if you were using a telephone line. Click here, I agree. Let's say that was Section 230. Section 230 was very simple. Any internet site whose terms of service are, if you do something illegal, you're not protected by the law, is not able to be sued. Okay, so then what would be the difference between YourTube and YouTube? Nothing, just the different, whether there's an R in the name. You can go to YourTube and you might see all kinds of offensive things, or you go to YouTube and you might see all kinds of offensive things. The point is, you're not protected. You're not in a sanitized environment. But let's say you could go to YourTube where you might come across terrifying videos of people promoting Nazi propaganda. You might come across the most disgusting, horrific images. You might come across like really uncomfortable things that are sadly, or again, not sadly, whatever, you know what I mean, in a morally repugnant sense that are protected by the First Amendment, right? You could go to that. Or you could go to YouTube, which has all the same protections, but is very sanitized. You won't come across any deeply offensive videos here. We make sure of that. Which would you choose? Most people would say, well, I want to go to YourTube. That's gross. You go to YourTube? You're nasty. That's disgusting. YourTube is full of Nazis. I'm going to go to YouTube. Wait, but why is YouTube allowed to do that? Oh, because they're doing it in good faith. Saagar, is that the free market or is that the government? You see, who can moderate a website where people are uploading thousands of hours of videos? That's a Herculean job. You would need, I think something like I heard is like 400 hours of video per minute are uploaded to YouTube. Some ridiculous numbers. I'm actually going to check right now. How many hours of video are, oh, it pops up right away, are uploaded to YouTube every minute? 500 hours. How could you moderate that? Well, the answer is you'd have to spend billions and billions of dollars to create incredibly smart AI that is more advanced than most people on the planet will ever come into contact with. Then you'd have to spend more untold billions of dollars to hire countless human staff who could then also be backups to the AI. If people say, "Oh, the AI was wrong," or something happened and the AI didn't pick up flagged my video incorrectly. So billions and billions of dollars allow you to utilize the government's 230 protection in good faith. YourTube.com, again, I don't know if that's a real website, and I apologize if it is, and it might be something bad. I'm just using it as a made-up example. I don't recommend that you even go. I've never typed that URL in. I have no idea what's there. Now that I'm saying that, I should check. Is there something called YourTube that's bad? If there is, I'm going to delete this whole video and start again. Okay, YourTube is just some dumb phishing website. Okay, fine. I don't know what it is. Yeah, some woman about picking up women. Great. Some innocent website. Let's say there would be a video hosting website called YourTube, right? YourTube also is a platform where you can upload your videos and express yourself as long as it's not illegal and doesn't violate the First Amendment. But it's not sanitized. You know why it's not sanitized? Because they don't have billions and billions of dollars. That's not the free market. The free market didn't create this conundrum. You know what created this conundrum? The fact that YouTube is allowed, under the guise of being a platform, to actually police itself. So they have all the benefits, essentially, of being a publisher. They can pick and choose what's shown on your website, but at the same time, they can claim publicly, officially, in a sort of heroic, righteous manner, that they are actually a platform. We are here as a place for you to express yourself freely in a way that supports the First Amendment rights of every human. Right? Except that if you do something that's really like just nobody would want to see that, we'll remove it because of, good faith. Oh, you're going to YourTube? YourTube, that place where people can host videos of Nazis and other like sick, disgusting things that are allowed under the First Amendment. You must be like a sick person. You must be like a really sicko weirdo. You know why? Because you could be going to YouTube, which is the same thing. It's a platform also, except that you won't be assaulted and you won't have to be exposed to all these horrific, disgusting things. The only reason you would go to YouTube is because obviously you like those things and you're in league with them. Oh, so the guy who has billions of dollars and can sanitize his website actually is not participating in the free market. He's utilizing government regulation to create an unfair, non-competitive environment where he has a huge advantage. Go on, Saagar. Tell us about how the free market is a giant failure. The free market isn't the failure. Section 230, which created the good faith ability for platforms to be publishers, is the problem. In a truly free market, I forgot the word. In contrast, I guess by contrast, a truly free market wouldn't offer you that option. In a truly free market, if the terms of service for Google were We are a publisher. We reserve the right to publish things. And if they're lies, then we won't publish them. And if we choose to publish them, it means that we accept responsibility for that content. YouTube would obviously look like a very different website. What if Section 230 only said, if you agree that as a platform, you will simply not police free speech? And that's the limitation of being a Section 230 platform. What if that was Section 230? How would the world look different? Now, I'm not saying that would be a good thing. There might be many complicated problems. You might have to say, oh, but what about what? I'm just giving you a contrast just to show you that this is not a free market problem. Let's just say. So then YouTube would have to redefine their terms of service. Their terms of service would be, YouTube is a platform. We take no responsibility for any content hosted here. If something is posted here and it's illegal, you violated the law. We have every right to then take that and report it to the police and say, hey, this guy posted something. He's calling for the assassination of the president. He's calling for I don't know, whatever. He's calling for white supremacy to be the law of the land, whatever, right? That's illegal in a clear way that incites violence. I meant, right? Whatever it is, that if it's illegal, and then it'll go to court, and the court will say, well, he was saying that white supremacists should eliminate all but he didn't eliminate, it's not clear, was it violent? And there'll be a court case, and there'll be a trial, and the law will decide whether or not you violated free speech. But the terms of service are, if you violate free speech, then you're not protected. If you don't violate free speech, we're a platform. What can we do? Express yourself. Now, by the way, YouTube would be probably a very horrible place where many disgusting things, right? Much to the terrible moral dismay of myself and others, pornography is legal and protected by the First Amendment right now, and the way they interpreted it, some insane reality. So guess what? That would be allowed to be on YouTube. What could YouTube possibly do? There's nothing. They couldn't do anything about it. But then, you see, no one would say anything if you went to Parler or if you went to minds.com or gab.ai. Because what would be the argument? The argument would be, hey, why would you go to Gab? There's Nazis. You know that they let Nazis post? Well, so does YouTube. YouTube also lets Nazis post. Yeah, but do you know there's disgusting, like, people who are, like, pretend, like, whatever they are. Yeah, but that's, YouTube has that also. Like, what? How is YouTube any, like, I could post a video like that on YouTube. Oh, but there's disgusting, all kinds of perverted, who knows. But YouTube, oh, you mean YouTube doesn't have that? But how are they allowed legal? Oh, it's because they spent billions of dollars creating a moderation team, because the terms of service aren't actually, as long as it doesn't violate the First Amendment, it's covered. So go on, Saagar. Tell us about how this is a giant failure of the free market. I can't even imagine a market that's almost as unfree. Well, I could, but you get the point. It's not a free market. And this is a lie. And he's lying. And he knows he's lying. Or maybe he doesn't. I don't believe that, though. He's too smart. It's a lie. Let's move on.
Through this episode. Second, though, is that the right, by and large, is a bankrupt political movement who does not care or want to fight for the interests of its voters and has terrible ideas about how to fix anything.
Now, I'm just going to point out, there are many people in government, not all, there are legitimately good people in government, but I will say that many people in government are atrophied husks who have become used to being part of the moneyed elite. They do think of themselves as better than the common man. I don't want to name names. It's hard to know. I'm not a prophet who can truly know what's in people's hearts. But he's not wrong that there are many people who they simply have either lost their way or don't know the way to help others. I'm not sure I believe in the idea that there are villains. I don't think, even on the left, I think Nancy Pelosi genuinely believes that she's doing a good thing. She's not, but I don't think she's like a cartoon villain who's twirling her mustache. She thinks that what she's doing is good for whatever her twisted rationalizations are. I think on the right, it's the same thing. These people don't want to help Americans? Of course they do. Of course they want to. They're just wrong about how to do it. And very often they justify things that are bad by convincing themselves that the ends justify the means, or that it's right for some action. Now, there might be a few people who are like, I don't care about these dumb Americans. They're rubes. They vote for me because I tell them what they want to hear. And I just want power and money. I'm sure there's maybe a few people like that, but by and large, it's not going to be your average person. So I don't like the way he phrases this, as if to say, like, and also, again, what's the purpose? And therefore what? And therefore you should vote for Democrats? Like, what? Nancy Pelosi, who held up the stimulus bill and played games with people's lives to the extent that many political analysts, including The Hill, say that it cost them the House? I mean, what's the, I just don't understand. So again, the goal would be to say that all political systems are bankrupt? And what? We need a revolution? They're not calling for that either. So I just don't buy this. I don't buy that he really buys this. I'm not convinced of his sincerity here. Republicans have no idea, no interest in helping you. Really? Like they're just evil cartoon villains? Meh, look at all these dummies. We don't want to help them. Meh. Let's go on.
One of the most common takes in lieu of Trump's banning from Twitter is, that's it, guys. Republicans finally have to grow a backbone and fight. They have to take a stand and stop being such wimps, right? It's compelling, but it's not true. The truth is, as one of my favorite Twitter accounts pointed out, that the right fights all the time. Republicans have broken norms on Merrick Garland and ACB to gain power. They fight rough all the time to pass tax cuts and deregulation. They'll break every norm in the book. But when it comes to protecting their voters or their economic livelihoods or reining extra governmental institutions that are far too powerful, yeah, they don't fight on that ground.
The intensity of the lie he just told hurts. It hurts. I want you to listen to what he just said. We're going to review that for a quick second.
They'll break every norm in the book.
They will break every norm in the book. They will break every norm in the book. What? Let's just take a quick look at this. Republicans did break norms with Merrick Garland and ACB to gain power. What is he referring to? As is well documented by historians, and in fact, you can go and find various videos about this on YouTube, the Merrick Garland situation was not a breaking of the norm. It was, in fact, something that was quite normal. The only thing that was perhaps somewhat outside, maybe in a little bit of a way, somewhat outside the norm, was the amount of time they did it for. But the idea of a president with an opposition Senate getting his nominee confirmed was not a breaking of the norm. This is a lie. Why would you say this lie? And with such conviction. Incidentally, Republicans were very justified because the last time they bipartisanly voted to secure a Supreme Court nominee that was liberal, they were sort of promised in not even implicitly, openly, overtly, that the incoming justice would be a bipartisan sort of moderate justice. And it turned out that that person was actually an extreme left, hyper progressive liberal. So they felt very burned. And there was an extreme nervousness. And there was this feeling that Merrick Garland maybe was like, he was trying to pick somebody who seemed, middle of the road in order to sneak in someone liberal. And by the way, I'm not saying there's merit or not. We can argue all day about Merrick Garland. I kind of felt for the guy. I do. I actually kind of feel like he really got the short end of that straw. And that maybe there was some legitimate. And by the way, it was also a big gamble. What if Trump hadn't won? What if Hillary Clinton had gotten to nominate someone? It could have been somebody much more liberal. She could have picked someone else. That would have been her choice. She wasn't stuck with Merrick Garland. But they took that risk, and it wasn't a breaking of the norm. It was a political maneuver that had been used in America. ACB? What norm did they break by Amy Coney Barrett? What are you even talking about? The norm of replacing a liberal woman with a I don't even know what he's referring to. I can't think of any norm that was broken in the appointing of Amy Coney Barrett. None. Except the speed of which it was done. Is that a breaking of a norm? That's like my sister drank a milkshake and I drank it faster, so I broke the norm. I don't even know what's being referred to here. What norm was broken? I honestly don't know. I'll tell you if you want to know something funny about breaking norms. The breaking of the norms is almost always something that, in fact, comes from the left in political institutions. Not always, but almost always, and on a grander scale. So, for example, I don't know how this just slips everyone's mind, right? When Harry Reid voted to nuke the filibuster and allow elections of federal judges by a simple majority vote, at the time, Mitch McConnell, who, by the way, the right has begged McConnell. I mean, I wasn't commenting on politics for so many years, but I remember some years back when the right begged McConnell to do away with a certain procedural thing that would stood in their way, and I don't remember what it was. And McConnell gave a speech. McConnell's speeches, by the way, some of which are great, not all of them, but some of them are great, are routinely overlooked. Nobody even reports on them or notices them. And he gave this amazing speech where he basically said, I will not cause our democracy, our society, our republic to be damaged by putting into place something that later generations will say, well, if he could do that, or if this could be done, then we will use it to achieve our means. He said, our system of checks and balances has to be maintained. But Harry Reid destroyed that. And Mitch McConnell is a practical person. He's not some kind of righteous, no. He's a guy, he said, okay, if simple majority is what you need, you did that. That's fine, you did it. And don't say, well, you did it now, so we're now going to, you already did it. You already broke the wall. For us to not walk through and be like, well, the wall is broken, but we're so noble and righteous, we will not walk through the broken wall. And then what? And then where we expect the next person to, again, not to everybody just ignore the hole in the wall. No, of course not. Mitch McConnell's understanding was, you broke the wall. You showed that you're willing to walk through the broken hole in the wall, so I'm also going to. That was a breaking of a norm in a major way. The breaking of a norm in a powerful, incredibly powerful, deeply institutional way. Another norm that was broken. Barack Obama passed a peace treaty with a country that was essentially an executive order. Nothing like that had ever been done. The deal with Iran, he went to Congress and it failed to pass. So he picked up his pen and he just created a peace deal with Iran out of nothing. And yet when Trump said that we're not going to be doing that, people acted like Trump was violating a norm. What was the norm? I know this is a tangent, but again, this is just an insane lie from Saagar. What norm was violated by Merrick Garland? And again, the problem is not willingness to fight rough. I'm just reading from this tweet here. It's what they are willing to fight for. Tax cuts? Yes. Building wall? No. Well, that's because many of them felt that there were issues with the way Trump wanted to go about it. Actually, most Republicans were pretty okay with the wall. I mean, this is just a nonsense. It's such an oversimplification of complicated things that it's just a lie. It's an oversimplification to the point of using shallow logic in a way that's supposed to grab this knee-jerk reaction from you. Hey, look at this zinger, zing! And so you're like, yeah, how come they're willing to fight? Yeah! It's not true. They didn't fight. Republicans put their reputations on the line by Kavanaugh. Oh, the whole Kavanaugh debacle is ridiculous. Talk about breaking of norms. Breaking of norms to allow an obvious liar, delusional psycho liar to testify in front of Congress and take her seriously. That was insane. That was a breaking of a norm. Right? By comparison, nobody took Tara Reid seriously, even though Tara Reid had a credible story and sounded like she was obviously telling the truth. Everything about Tara Reid looked like she was telling the truth. Again, obviously is not the same as provably. I have no idea if she's telling the truth or not, but everything about Tara Reid seemed credible, and everything about Christine Blasey Ford, everything from her mannerisms to her constant lies, about flying, about her fear, like everything, constant lies, a nonstop stream of lies. To her mannerisms, to the fact that she named people who could not corroborate her information. She said, go to them and ask them, and they're like, yeah, we don't know what she's talking about. It was obvious garbage. And it was given a place on the national stage. That's the breaking of a norm. And the Republicans fought. Some of them were really nervous. I don't know why, but they were. And you know what they did? They put themselves out there. They put their necks on the line. They fought. Some of them fought hard. What are you talking about? Republicans don't fight. What are you talking about? Fighting China? No. Really? We have dealt serious blows to China in the past few years. Maybe there are some people who weren't always totally on board. Maybe some people went too slow. But the idea that the Republicans have not been fighting China the last few years is, again, it's just it's an oversimplification to the point of being a lie. For what purpose? Again, because it fits the narrative in this particular video that Saagar's trying to drive home, which is you can't rely on the government to regulate big tech. Or certainly, at least, Republicans. So let's see where he goes with this, right? With this observation that the libertarians were wrong. The free market can't help you. And guess what? The Republicans also can't help you. Because, you know why? Because A, they're only interested in fighting for their moneyed overlords. It's an oversimplification that it's insane. And B, at the end of the day, they refuse to fight dirty for things that don't matter to them personally because they're just not interested in helping you. Yeah. They're all evil lunatics, every single one of them. Again, there might be a few, but not all of them. All right, let's move on. Okay, Saagar, see what else you got.
But when it comes to protecting their voters or their economic livelihoods or reining extra governmental institutions that are far too powerful, yeah, they don't fight on that ground.
Again, an oversimplification. Is there some truth? Absolutely. Some truth. But it's the expansion of that grain of truth into a massive oversimplification that's basically a lie at this point.
Because they mostly work for or are funded by the people that they would need to rein in. As friend of the show Matt Stoller pointed out, when the Federal Trade Commission brought an antitrust suit to break up Facebook, it was brought up on a very close 3-2 vote. Who opposed it? It's not the Democrats. It was the 2 Republicans who sit on that body.
I want to just point out something. Antitrust in conservative circles has always been deeply, deeply controversial. I, myself, some years ago, deeply delved into it. Again, I was teaching politics, and I delved deeply into the ideas of monopoly, anti-monopoly. It is not so simple. You see, everybody thinks like, what could be better? We should just break up monopolies. The fact is, every time the government touches things, there's always unforeseen consequences. In truth, when the government broke up, I think it was Bell, one of the unintended consequences of forcing Bell to break up into smaller subsidiaries was many of the very small companies in America got trampled. Do you know why? If you ever watched The Office, a TV show I watched many years ago, there's actually a fascinating parable that they can ingrained in the show, I think unwittingly, that teaches this very lesson. Michael and some of the employees start a small startup paper company to compete with Dunder Mifflin. And they're making profit and it's going well. And in fact, they're growing. And then they sort of hit this weird wall where all of a sudden when they want to corporatize and now there's like benefits and salaries and all this, and all of a sudden they can't compete anymore with the big guys. Right? But the fascinating part is when they were small, when it was a small mom and pop operation, then they could. And not only that, they were making a profit. There is, in the real world, parallels to that. Now, over there, what they were trying to say was, well, the point was to grow. And you can't grow because then you won't be able to compete. Okay, fine. That's the point in that show. I'm just using it as a parable. In the real world, very often, small businesses, it is very worthwhile for them to compete against the giant monopolies. Why? Because as the monopoly grows bigger, there's more and more layers of bureaucracy in the monopoly itself. And this comes with its own complications and its own requirements for profit margins. And often the way that it becomes worth it for you as a consumer to utilize the monopoly is not just because it's the only show in town, right? It's because the monopoly will say, hey, we're big and bloated, but we're so powerful that we can offer you various conveniences that no one else can. So, for example, is Amazon always the cheapest place to buy things? Actually, no. Very often it's not. But that free 2-day shipping, can't beat that, right? So a smaller business has plenty of room to open in the wings of Amazon and say, hey, in the shadow, I should say, of Amazon and say, hey, we can service you and give you better pricing because we have way less overhead, way less layers of bureaucracy, way less pensions, way less whatever. But we're not going to be able to offer that kind of service that Amazon offers because we just don't have that kind of structure. So we can't offer free returns. We can't offer free shipping. But if you order from us in bulk and you give us plenty of time to ship it to you and have our truck driver deliver it, then we can actually beat their prices by not an insignificant amount. Now the government comes along and says, Amazon, you're a monopoly. You've got a monopoly on this whole shipping to home thing. We're going to break you up into several smaller businesses. Now, each of those smaller businesses now has less bureaucracy and can focus their attention on getting smaller markets. And you know what's going to happen? That can, and in fact, by the telephone companies, it did choke out many of those small companies that were competing for the sort of shadow space. In addition, there's a real skill and an art and a industry around building up a small business to the point where the monopoly, who has billions and trillions of dollars, will sort of see you and say, it's not really worth it for us to let that guy hang around. He's becoming annoying. Let's just buy him. Wow, you just made $1 billion from a company you started up because monopoly is like, yeah, we want that. Now, again, does that mean monopolies are good? No, it doesn't. Are monopolies bad? Maybe. There's no black and white answers in this world. The world is not a simple place. But this foolish notion that the solution is the government. The government is rarely a good solution to anything. So the fact that a conservative voted against this, I would like to sit down and have a in-depth 3-hour conversation with that conservative before I'm willing to damn him. And to just bring this up as I'm going to prove to you that conservatives, A, don't fight big tech, B, don't care about you, and C, certainly can't be relied on to rein in big tech because look, this guy voted an antitrust against Facebook. So, antitrust laws among many conservatives are very controversial. And they believe that they're a tremendous abuse of governmental power to regulate businesses where the government shouldn't be sticking their fingers into the free market. Is it possible that this guy was voted and paid for? Yes. Yes, it is possible. But am I just going to oversimplify the issue and boil it down so I could spew some narrative onto a 12-minute video on YouTube? No, that's why this video is 47 minutes. And I hate it because it's too long. And I hope that people who watch it are still watching it and aren't bored out of their minds. Let's move on.
It's not that the right doesn't care about political power. It certainly does. It's that its professional apparatus only cares about using it to further enrich people and our enemies.
Again, what a line to say on a YouTube video. How do we live in a world where people could be censored for sharing a video about a doctor sharing his opinions about coronavirus, but this garbage can be spewed out unchecked? I'll listen to that again.
Professional apparatus only cares about using it to further enrich people and our enemies.
The professional apparatus of the Republican political world, right? We're talking about elected officials representing tens and tens and tens of millions of Americans. We're talking about congressmen, senators, local officials, mayors and governors. You know what those people exist as part of? A professional apparatus that exists to enrich themselves and who?
Using it to further enrich people and our enemies.
And our enemies. I mean, if you heard that line, if I took that line out of context and I clipped it, which by the way, there's not really much context that would justify any other interpretation of this line. You're watching the video with me. He's basically saying these people are evil. They're evil. How is this less incitement than whatever Donald Trump said? I mean, imagine for a second, I'm standing in front of a group and I would say, I want you guys to know something. You're relying on Republicans to help you? Let me tell you that Republicans are interested in enriching themselves and our enemies. What an inflammatory and insane remark.
And here's the other point about antitrust, which seems to be a consensus position now on the right. What evidence is there that a separate Facebook and Instagram wouldn't make this exact same decision? Or why would Amazon Web Services, separated from Amazon, not do this too? Hint, they still would.
You know why? Because it's not a free market. Because they can do it and claim that they're doing it in good faith. Saagar as I spent a lot of time explaining earlier in the video. Since they can claim that they're doing it in good faith, now anybody who doesn't do it, you can blast them as being supportive and sympathetic to the ideas that they're not policing in good faith. So if there was an Amazon Web Services that was called Blabbertron Web Services, and they wouldn't regulate this content, they would get slammed by people who would say, how can you allow Nazi sympathetic posts and disgusting vitriolic whatever? Why aren't you... Oh, well, don't say you're protected by Section 230, because Amazon Web Services and YouTube and Google, who all are protected by Section 230, they're getting rid of that content. So it's not exactly a free market. So of course they would, because if they don't, they'll get slammed. Why aren't you, in good faith, sanitizing your platform?
Antitrust isn't the problem here. It's about ideological capture of every single one of our institutions.
No. It's about the fact that we allow people to act like publishers and claim their platforms as long as they say that they're being publishers in good faith. That's the problem, not the ideological capture of our institutions. But, by the way, what ideological capture is he referring to? The ideology of enriching yourself and hurting your enemies? And enriching your enemies? Let's see what he has to say, because what would that even mean? The problem is the ideological capture of our institutions. Meaning what? Meaning Google and Microsoft and Amazon Web Services have all been ideologically captured by people who hate Nazis? Why would that be a bad thing, Saagar?
We have to grapple with that to understand the reality and depth of the problem. Finally, the lesson to me is this, and this is the one a lot of conservatives are not going to want to hear. At the end of the day, going all in to defend apps like Parler is not the answer. Why? Because Parler actually was used by militia members and rioters to plan violence on Capitol Hill. Here's an example. One user during the riots said, quote, take zip ties with you, sneak up on them like ninjas, and zip tie their hands and feet. And another said, here, have an ice pick in hand.
This part of the video is probably one of the most enraging parts of the video. Do you know why? Because Parler would have deleted all these posts. Not only would Parler have deleted them, they would have happily booted those people off their platform, banned them permanently for life, and given over their information to the police. Do you know why they didn't? Because they don't have the manpower. You see, here's the thing. Let's say I open a website and I make a platform, and I put in the terms of service, hey, I'm acting in good faith and I want to moderate my content. Therefore, if you post something that's like very, very disgusting and inflammatory, I'll remove it, just like Twitter would. But I'm not going to be policing you, so as long as it's like mostly protected by free speech, I'm really only going to exercise my good faith argument. Now, these things aren't even protected. This is calling for violence. If you would be on the phone and you would say to your friend, hey, we're going to go and we're going to riot. And while we're rioting, we're going to sneak up behind the guards with pickaxes and zip ties. And we're going to kill them. That would be illegal. That's illegal. Have an ice pick in hand so you can stab them and keep going. That is not protected by the First Amendment. How is that a Parler issue? If you posted that on Twitter, that would be illegal. Parler's terms of service can't allow that. But the answer is, of course not. Parler doesn't have the billions of dollars or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars necessary at this moment to hire the kind of task force necessary to police their platform as efficiently as the other platforms. So therefore, they simply cannot remove content fast enough to keep up with the flow of bad content. Now, there's two ways to go from here. One way to go from here would be like, well, what can you do? When they get to it, they'll remove it. It's not like they want it to be there. The other way to do it is, we gotcha! Zing! Why would you pick option 2? Well, option 2 actually does make sense in a world where other people are sanitizing their platforms quicker, and they're doing it outside the boundaries of the First Amendment restrictions or unrestrictions. So when you go to Twitter and Twitter says, hey, you post something bad, bam, you're out. We got you. Bam. Parler's not doing that. They must be a bunch of Nazi sympathizers. Well, maybe they're a small startup and they don't like the level of good faith censorship you're doing, but they simply don't have the manpower to police their platform as efficiently. Nah, could be that, but probably they're Nazi sympathizers. Also, even if that were true, why would you go to their website when your eyeballs could be assaulted by horrible vitriol? You should come to our website that's sanitized in good faith. What are you doing, Saagar? You're promoting lies. You're literally promoting lies. Why would we defend Parler? In fact, Parler was being used. So what? Of course you should defend Parler. You know why you should defend Parler? Because you should defend any platform that says we want people to say things that are protected by the First Amendment in a free and open forum. That's why. Isn't that the anti-establishment person you claim to be? It's insane. By the way, many people spend a lot of time documenting Twitter's egregious violations in the same way. So again, let's just listen to him say it again, because it's so important to hear it come out of his mouth.
The problem here, it's about ideological capture of every single one of our institutions. We have to grapple with that to understand the reality and depth of the problem. Finally, the lesson to me is this, and this is the one a lot of conservatives are not going to want to hear. At the end of the day, going all in to defend apps like Parler is not the answer.
What? Absolutely you should do that. What does that mean, the answer? Absolutely we should be screaming at the top of our lungs. If there is a platform for free speech, if that platform is the main street of Skokie, Illinois, and the people marching down it are Nazis, and the only way that we can ensure that we, as religious Orthodox Jews or practicing fundamentalist Christians or Pastafarians, can ensure that we all have an unrestricted First Amendment right to utilize the public that we have created in this country to express ourselves. The only way we can ensure that is to ensure that that is applied even to Nazis, as long as they don't violate whatever the restrictions on the First Amendment are, which we could debate, but who cares, because they were decided by the Supreme Court. So what's the point of debating them right now? Forget it. But if the only way we can ensure that we have that unrestricted ability is to say that they have that unrestricted ability, then let the Nazis speak. For God's sake, quite literally. One of the very first things that goes when free speech is not tolerated is religion. I want my religious free speech to always be protected at the highest level, to know that it can never be touched. And if it's required for me to go all in and say that any place that is supposed to be a platform for free speech should not be allowed to police anything like that. And you know what? That might mean that all of these websites have to allow pornography, something which I am morally repulsed by and opposed to. And then maybe I won't be able to use any of them. Maybe all of these websites will become so flooded with inappropriate things that I, as somebody who is morally opposed to them, will say, I guess I can't use any social media. Now, at that point, you might say, we should have common decency laws. Yeah, maybe we should. That's a legislative process. We have, for example, in most cities in America, laws that say you cannot run around in the public, which is publicly owned, naked. It's inappropriate. Those are laws. They went through a legislative process. You might say, I don't understand. Being naked should be protected by okay, so go battle out in court. There's a legislative process. And then that law will apply across every website and every platform and every public space. And there will be no way for one website to use it to their advantage. So it will be a open and free and equal market. Maybe not completely free because of some restrictions, but it will be a market of equally free opportunities. We don't have that now. We don't have that now because good faith allows people to do things that there cannot be equal opportunity for other people to do. If there was common decency laws that every single person had to follow, so that would be, I guess, equalized. But of course we should go all in. What does that even mean? Meaning you're already taking the premise. You have to realize that Saagar is already giving you the underlying premise that a website that is not sanitized is bad. And for us to defend it makes us seem like we're sympathetic to a non-sanitized website, even though the sanitization requires billions of dollars and zillions of man hours and resources that other people won't have, and therefore the market will not be free. He's saying, don't defend the free market. Don't do that. That's crazy. There's loons out there. I don't even know what to say. Would he have defended the right of Nazis to march up and down the street in Skokie, Illinois? I don't know. I can't imagine why he would. Wouldn't he give the same speech? Wouldn't the same speech be applicable? Here's one thing we have to not do. Don't defend the right of Nazis to march in public. Why not? Why not? Because we could have an alternative public where people don't ever see Nazis, and then why would they want to be part of our public where they could see Nazis? But then you're literally calling for government censorship of freedoms to protect people. And in this case, you're saying that we should allow the tech oligarchs to do it? I don't even understand his logic here. Let's move on.
Why? Because Parler actually was used by militia members and rioters to plan violence on Capitol,
which is illegal and would have violated anybody's terms of service. The fact that they got away with it on the app that was trying to be competition to the app that kicked people off who were well within their First Amendment rights. So they ended up going to an app that was not as well policed because that app was trying to open a more free speech friendly place, but didn't have the manpower to police them. Yeah, it's a little convoluted. You might have to go back and rewind and listen to it again. So you're saying what? We should be opposed to the place that doesn't have the manpower to sanitize themselves, which at least they're in a free market. We're saying, no, don't even do that. You're on the side of censorship. What? This is, by the way, the conservative.
Here's an example. One user during the riots said, quote, take zip ties with you, sneak up on them like ninjas, and zip tie their hands and feet. And another said, here, have an ice pick in hand so you can stab. Keep going. This is serious stuff. Parler was mostly getting it unremoved from their website. In many cases, the violent content on their platform, which explicitly violated their own terms of service, was allowed up, including calls for killing Vice President Mike Pence.
What does that mean, was allowed up? You know how many posts get flagged and reported on Twitter and are clear violations of the Twitter rules? But, like, Twitter just doesn't have the manpower and time available to deal with every little thing. And so eventually they get to it. Sometimes not. There are posts on Twitter that have been there for years and are clear violations of their platform's rules. So what? Therefore, we shouldn't defend the fact that their platform where people are allowed to express ideas is being destroyed? What is this? How is it? And he's saying it with such conviction.
For supposedly betraying Trump. Many other Republicans who did not vote to decertify those election results. That's not something to defend. Clearly, this is a company whose main appeal is...
Again, what? Let's go back and listen to that last line again, because it's so insidious, and he says it with such conviction and so quickly.
Many other Republicans who did not vote to decertify those election results. That's not something to defend. Republicans who killing Vice President Mike Pence for supposedly betraying Trump. Many other Republicans who did not vote to decertify those election results. That's not something to defend.
Of course not. Who's defending that? What is this nonsense? He's saying, if you defend Parler, you're defending the people who called for violence against those who refused to decertify. No, you're not. You're just saying that. I'm like, it's so insane. If we would deconstruct that idea, that would be like saying Nazis marched down the street in Skokie, Illinois. If you don't say that the street has to be destroyed, doesn't that mean that you sympathize with the Nazis? What kind of a convoluted and twisted logic is that? No, I like the street. I don't like the Nazis. Let's say the Nazis were doing something illegal. Let's say people were marching down the street in Skokie, Illinois, screaming, "We are going to kill the Jews. If we see a Jew, we will take him and we will kill him right now. And I'm going to name his name, Elliot Weiss. We are going to kill you right now. Where is Elliot Weiss? Find him." That's illegal. Would you say, if you don't support this street being destroyed, this street needs to be destroyed, and if you don't support that, well, I guess you're okay with a mob of people marching to kill Elliot Weiss? What? What?
Clearly, this is a company whose main appeal is to the fringe and was not enforcing their own policies against them.
Clearly, its main appeal was to the fringe? I don't think that's at all true. I don't even know. By the way, I'd love to see some statistics back that up. There were millions of users on Parler. Millions. Parler, whatever. I keep switching. Millions and millions of users. To say that clearly they were trying to appeal to the Nazis. What an insane statement to make. What an insane. And how does that make you feel? Like, I was on Parler. And I really was making a presence there. And it was great. Was I a part of the fringe? Was all of my followers part of the fringe? Are all of the followers? There many, many well-known public figures had hundreds of thousands of followers on there. They all fringe lunatics? The main appeal, by the way, again, clearly. You see how it's so insidious.
That's not something to defend. Clearly, this is a company whose main appeal is to the fringe.
Clearly, it's not a suggestion. Clearly, this is a company whose main appeal is to the fringe. What are you supposed to do? Again, that's like saying, if you allow Nazis to speak, your main appeal is to Nazis. Why? Because everybody else is sanitizing them off the website. You're not sanitizing them. So clearly, your main appeal is to Nazis. What are you supposed to do with this logic? This, by the way, is the most establishment logic you could find. This guy is anti-establishment? You couldn't pay for better establishment logic.
And was not enforcing their own policies against them.
A lie. It's a lie. They simply were swamped. Their growth exploded exponentially, much more than they thought they would. They were trying to deal with expanding their ability to serve so many people with how to police it. And I'm not saying they made every decision correctly. I wasn't there. I don't know. I wasn't in their board meetings. But obviously, they did not have enough people. And I don't know. Maybe they should have tried harder and gotten more people. I don't know. But clearly, there was some errors made in their monitoring and dealing with of the situation. So they were sympathetic to it? No, of course not. There is no doubt in my mind, having seen interviews with high-ranking executives in the Parler company, that every person at Parler was on the same page. If we find these posts, we are deleting them and taking them down.
One of the biggest mistakes that the right has made amidst this debate is allowing themselves to be co-opted by Nazis and violent loons who are trying to con them with free speech arguments.
Yes. Clearly, we are allowing ourselves to be co-opted by loons who say, hey, if you believe in free speech, you need to let us speak. How loony.
If the right solution to Twitter is a site which has zero moderation, that site will become a hotbed for Nazis and other crazy people.
This is the culmination, the penultimate culmination of the establishment logic, which he had to use lie after lie to get to. The climactic moment that infuriated me enough to make this over an hour-long video, which nobody in the world is going to watch all the way to the end. You know why? Because at the end of it all, he reaches one final conclusion, which is that, let's listen to him say it again. I want to hear him say it.
If the right solution to Twitter is a site which has zero moderation, that site will become a hotbed for Nazis and other crazy people.
If you allow an alternative to Twitter to spring up, which is going to be unmoderated, unsanitized, that's going to be the gathering ground for all the perversion and disgusting, gross scum of society. And therefore, you should not support that. You should not support a free market. You should not support an alternative platform. You should not support saying that nobody should be allowed to sanitize. Because what we should have is we should be, allowed to bully people and say, how come you're not on the sanitized platform? You must be a Nazi sympathizer. So that all the decent people feel, okay, either I believe in that in the first place, so it fits with my ideology. I believe people should be moderated. I believe people should be silenced. I believe people should be allowed to be kicked off of platforms if they say the wrong thing. And therefore, anyways, I am drawn to the platform that is sanitized. So you're going to have that chunk of people. Then you're going to have the chunk of people who say, well, why should I allow myself to be, my eyeballs to be assaulted by negative ideas if they don't have to be? So I'm going to go to the platform. Well, I know I'll never have to see something that is offensive. They have that chunk of people. Then you have the chunk of people who are like, well, I don't really care that much because I'm mostly talking about recipes and what's for dinner and posting my outfit of the day. And it's just not worth it for me to deal with the harassment of going to a website where people will say to me, how could you be on that website? Don't you know it's a hotbed of Nazis? So that chunk of people is going to be there. So who's left? Who's left? Oh, the people who really care about free speech and the Nazis. Well, you just created that faction out of nowhere. So now you have this alliance. Oh, you care about free speech? You're a Nazi? Haha, you guys. Oh, yeah. What? This is the most establishment thing I've ever heard in my life. But wait, he has a solution. A perfect establishment solution.
Who have been banned from Twitter. It happens every time. First Gab, then Parler. Any alternative has to focus instead on the middle, where I think all of us are. I don't think Nazis and militias should be allowed to on any platform.
Wow! I don't think Nazis and militias should be allowed on any platform. I think we should expand the First Amendment, and it should say, anything that is not said in good faith is illegal. And he'll say, well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying as a private company. What a private company? If you're a private company and somebody writes a lie and it's not true, why can't I sue you? Oh, because you're protected by the government. Oh, it's not a free market. You're a private company utilizing government protections, which would apply to you if you were a platform, but you're acting as a publisher, but it's still considered protected as a platform because it's in good faith. That's what you mean we should be supporting. So that no one can compete with you, because then they would need millions of dollars in order to create the same structure and be sanitized, and that would be in good faith also. And then we could support them because they also wouldn't have Nazis, because they are also sanitized, because it's in good faith. Right? Did I get that right?
To plan violent attacks on the Vice President of the United States. I also think that when Antifa and BLM rioters plan attacks and dox people, that they should be removed.
Guess what? Everyone agrees with that. There's literally no one who doesn't say, you know why? Because it's the law! Wow, Saagar, are you saying that people should follow the law? Brilliant commentary from the Hill. If people violate the law on public platforms, just like if they would violate the law in a text message, just like if they would violate the law on a phone call, they should not be tolerated. Man, groundbreaking stuff here.
And I think that when right-wing rioters do that, they should too. I don't think left-wing identitarianism should inform content moderation, and I think...
You don't think left-wing identitarianism... If somebody breaks the law, what the bleep does that have to do with content moderation? If you plan a riot, and it's clear that you say, guys, listen, you know that mom and pop jewelry store in the corner? I think that guy is a white supremacist. Let's gather at 8 o'clock, and we're going to smash his windows. What do you have to believe in leftist content? What is that even? It's illegal. What is he even talking about? This is just a word salad of garbage. Again, it's a patina of self-assuredness meant to convey and express his ideas that all of my assumptions are correct, and here's the logical conclusions that you have to reach. I will spoon-feed them to you.
That in general, people actually like social media and they want the same standards on it for everyone. That's a real majoritarian position. It's one that is essentially unbeatable when argued in the public square.
You have to hear his entire statement to understand the insane lunacy of what he just said. So let's go back a few seconds.
I also think that when Antifa and BLM rioters plan attacks and dox people, that they should be removed. And I think that when right-wing rioters do that, they should too. I don't think left-wing identitarianism should inform content moderation, and I think that in general, people actually like social media and they want the same standards on it for everyone.
People actually like social media and they want the same standards on it for everyone, which is not possible if websites are allowed to moderate the content in good faith. That's not possible, because then whoever controls the levers of power on that website will determine what the good faith argument is. Right, Saagar? Right?
That's a real majoritarian position. It's one that is essentially unbeatable when argued in the public square.
What is he suggesting here? You understand, again, how insidious this is? This is literally establishment politics. Establishment politics is say something meaningless, but say it with conviction. So he's suggesting that what politicians should do, and he'll spell it out for you in a moment, is they should go out and say, I am against ideological policing of websites, and everyone, we can all agree. And it is something I'm making a campaign promise to you, that I will ensure that everyone is allowed to be who they want to be and say what they want to say. It's all empty. It's all garbage. What does that have to do with policy? It's not a policy position. What's the policy position he's espousing? Let's hear.
It doesn't require sticking your head out for crazy, violent people who don't care about you and are only using you in order to preserve their relevance.
The ACLU would disagree. They would say that protecting free speech does require you to stick your head out and defend Nazis. That's what they would say. Or maybe that's what they would have said. I don't know if they would still say that. But of course not if they break the law, because that's the law. We don't need terms of service or content moderation to inform breakage of the law, because it's the law. It applies equally to everyone, Saagar.
It doesn't require sticking your head out for crazy, violent people who don't care about you and are only using you in order to preserve their relevance in our society. That's our way forward. You don't fight to the death for Parler or Gab, or even for Trump for that matter. Fight to the death for average people who want to casually express their political opinions without censorship. There's basically nobody in America that is against that. And it's how conservatives, and even more important, everyone can win in this situation.
What a bunch of empty garbage. Everyone can win if we all agree that we're just going to do our best to make sure that we're all treated fairly and equally. And that's my policy position. How does that translate into anything? What does that even mean? What do you do with that? Is that calling for Section 230 reform? Well, you didn't say that. Is that saying that places like Parler and Gab should be allowed to open? Well, he's certainly not saying that, because he thinks that those places are going to be a hotbed of Nazi sympathizers, and that's going to, for sure, somehow be leading to illegal activity that will be unmoderated, and it's against the law, and therefore, what? Amazon should shut them down? Why not just take them to court and sue them for, as a platform, not policing themselves and allowing people to, because it's a platform and it's protected from that? They're not party to that? Well, then what's the problem? Then we have to change the laws and legislate. What are you calling for here?
That was the thing, Krystal. I mean, this has inspired...
Let's listen to him say it again, because it's so confusing. It's just a bunch of words. The last 10 seconds are just pure word salad.
People actually like social media, and they want the same standards on it for everyone. That's a real majoritarian position. It's one that is essentially unbeatable when argued in the public square. It doesn't require sticking your head out for crazy, violent people who don't care about you and are only using you in order to preserve their relevance in our society. That's our way forward. You don't fight to the death for Parler or Gab, or even for Trump for that matter. Fight to the death for average people who want to casually express their political opinions without censorship.
Hi, my name is Laser Weiss, and I'm running for district whatever Congress position senatorship. And I want to tell you something. Big tech today is out of control. But I'm here to tell you that everyone wants everyone to be treated fairly and equally, and that's what I stand for. I stand for everyone to be treated fairly and equally and with the same standards. I stand for you, the average American. I'm one of you, and I understand what you're coming from. You don't want to defend the crazy lunatics who are planning violence. You don't want, whether it's the left or the right, the people who are Antifa or rioting. We don't want any of those people. Rather, we want the middle, and that's what I'm here for. Is that a policy position? What? What is that? Again, it's the most establishment politics ever, because establishment politics is say meaningless things. So he gave a whole dissertation on how we can't trust Republicans to fight for us, we can't trust big tech to police itself, we can't trust the government to police big tech, and therefore, you know what we should do? We should say, everybody, just be nice to each other, and we should treat each other fairly, and that's the way forward. And we should what? What was the line he said?
Don't fight to the death for Parler or Gab,
what should we fight to the death for?
Or even for Trump, for that matter. Fight to the death for average people.
What does that mean? Fight to the death for average people. In what way? In what way? How would you do that? What would you say to Amazon Web Services? What would you say to Twitter? Say to Twitter, listen, Twitter, you better treat average people really well. Okay. I'm going to fight to the death for that. Okay. My name is Senator Laser Weiss, and I made a promise to my constituents that I would fight to the death for their average right to be an average person and be treated fairly. And Twitter, you better treat average people in an average way, and I will fight to the death for it. Okay? So what do we have to do differently? You better moderate your content in good faith. Okay, we're doing that. Great. Good. And I don't want to see any place like Parler or Gab allowing crazy lunatics free reign. That's not what the average American wants. What is this?
Who want to casually express their political opinions without censorship. There's basically nobody in America that is against that. And it's how conservatives, and even more important, everyone can win in this situation. That was the thing, Krystal. I mean, this has...
What's astonishing, by the way, the last part of this video, and I have to end it because this has gone way too long. The most astonishing part of this video is the part where he talks to Krystal. Do you know why? Because now he's turning to her. She's supposed to be the ultra-liberal progressive. If there's one thing I admire about Jimmy Dore, it's that Dore is very consistent in his extreme anti-censorship stance, which is probably one of the things that informs me that he is genuinely sincere. Dore is flamingly, vehemently, and furiously anti-censorship. But that's not Krystal, because Krystal isn't real. She's a faker and a liar, just like Saagar. So let's see what Krystal's reaction is.
In this situation. That was the thing, Krystal. I mean, this has inspired a lot of takes and all of that. But the way that I see it is that by the right has allowed itself for many of these people who are fringe characters who've been banned from Twitter, sometimes justly, sometimes unjustly, in many cases, for them to say, take an absolutist position that you're their right in order to be associated essentially with your alternative. Well, then you are, basically bathed in the stench of all of these absolutely disgusting and terrible people who don't care about you. I, again, think here that the alternative is not to see, like, I'm scared that Apple, Google, and others could take off Parler. That is a principal position. Yes. But in effect, like, Parler was doing some things which were bad. They were allowing content which explicitly violated their own terms of service to be allowed on their platform. Has Twitter done the same thing? Yeah, all the time. And do they deserve either to be taken off the Apple App Store and others? I don't think so. They should be given a warning. They should actually enforce it, and others. But saying that they did nothing wrong just erases their own culpability and the reality of what was actually existing there on the platform. We have to actually find a majoritarian position here around what people think. I think most people would probably agree that it is crazy that Facebook and Twitter can decide the sitting president of the United States is no longer allowed on their platform. I genuinely believe the Democratic base. Most people would be like, yeah, I'm not with that one.
Well, that was really thought-provoking, really nuanced. Thank you for putting that together, because it actually raised some issues for me that I hadn't fully thought through. I mean, one of the biggest problems here is that it's all just so ad hoc.
Yes.
Right? I mean, there's a few layers of problems. Number one is, as we've talked about here in Solar and everybody else, like, the fact that these few individuals have such power is very troubling. Whether you, like, agree with the discrete decision-making or not, that's a really troubling state of affairs. So that's number one. Number two is, like, it was...
What does that mean, whether you agree or not? Is there some room to agree that a public platform where people were allowed to express their ideas should be shut down? But okay, maybe she means because they're supportive of illegal efforts to arrange crimes. I'll give her that, but let's see where she goes.
Really disturbing how it's so coordinated.
Exactly.
And we've seen this before, by the way. Everybody sort of goes along, and then there's somebody takes the first step, and then everybody else piles on, and so you basically get, like, the internet death penalty, and you can't post absolutely anywhere. The other thing, like I was saying, is the fact that it's also ad hoc. So if there was one really clear standard that was applied really uniformly, and we could all see and have expectation that if we cross that line, then there are going to be consequences, then you could deal with it. And that's where you get into the conversation about government regulation, about potentially treating them as public utilities, so that you have a more uniform standard. Because look, with Trump, and last week I was kind of like, I could maybe see like a short-term ban or suspension or something like this, but to kick him off of Twitter for life. And if you look at the tweets that were actually used to justify that, I mean, they were actually more used to like
I'm so sorry. I almost skipped that.
Standard that was applied really uniformly, and we could all see and have expectation that if we cross that line, then there are going to be consequences. Then you could deal with it, and that's where you get into the conversation about government regulation, about potentially treating them as public utilities, so that you have a more uniform standard. Because look, with Trump, and last week I was kind of like, I could maybe see like a short-term ban.
Why? Did Trump violate the First Amendment? Again, or violate, rather, the limitations of the First Amendment? Did Trump say something that in court could be proven to show that he incited violence, and therefore he committed the crime of incitement? Did he do that? I've been watching a lot of law type of people dissecting Trump's words, and it's very clear that no self-respecting lawyer who's not insanely and openly lunatically partisan believes that Trump did anything that violated any standard of law. So, Krystal, why is it that you support the idea that, I guess Trump should be given a ban? Like, I could hear that. Why? Well, because he was reckless and he said things that could lead to... So? That's, unfortunately, you know who else does that? Anybody who says crazy, hateful things. We don't ban them from the public. Do you think it doesn't inspire violence when Nazis march around saying, Jews will not replace us? Doesn't that inspire violence against Jews? As a Jew, I don't think those people should be temporarily banned from the public. It's unfortunate that to protect all our freedoms, I have to protect their freedom too. It is unfortunate. If we lived in a moral and virtuous society, perhaps we could all agree on what morality and virtue are, and therefore we could legislate that. But we know that road doesn't lead to good places. And so we said, everybody, the standard is freedom. Unless it's so clearly destructive to societies are, courts decided what those standards are, and you can disagree or agree, but that's what the courts decided. So it's of little practical impact. The courts were forced to make a decision, and they said if you're inciting violence, we think that's so destructive to society that it's not covered by the idea that your speech is free. All right, debate, not debate. That's what they decided. You have a problem with it? You think that Trump should be banned for not violating free speech? Really? You're the liberal?
Or suspension or something like this, but to kick him off of Twitter for life. Yeah. And if you look at the tweets that were actually used to justify that, I mean, they were actually more mild than some of the content that he's posted there in the past. And also, to my knowledge, he's the only world leader who's been kicked off of Twitter. Like, can you really make the argument that he is worse than everyone else in the world? I mean, there are terrorists on there. There's all kinds of horrible people on there. And so that's the other piece of this, is a decision was made by these platforms, not about the specific content that was being posted on their sites. A decision was made about this person. Yes. Like, we have passed judgment on this individual, and we don't want them there anymore. And again, if you have a uniform standard for that, okay, like if you're going to say, you know, we're not going to have murders on this, we're not going to have people who've been charged with terror, like whatever your standard is, okay, maybe we could live with that, but it all seems really arbitrary and really ad hoc.
This is the part that troubles me. You have a person like Jimmy Dore, who I respect, who quotes her on occasion. She just said something that he has a running joke on his show about. She said, if you want to say that all murderers shouldn't be allowed on our platform, if someone murdered someone, does he no longer have the right to free speech in this country? Is that the law? I don't think so. I think even murderers have the right to free speech. Now, they might not have the right to freely move around. We might restrict many of their rights. But now a murderer is not in jail. I'll assume if he's in jail, he lost all his rights to some extent. But now the murderer is not in jail. She's saying, well, if Twitter wants to say, if someone is a murderer, we know that that person is a murderer. So then we don't want him here. We don't want him on our platform. So on Jimmy Dore's show, he has a running joke with his wife, Steph, where she'll stand in front of a banner behind her that says, of course we don't want censorship. We just want common sense censorship. And it's a laugh, because they both know how ridiculous that is. Why is Krystal's reaction here not, yes, Saagar, you're right. It's crazy that anybody's allowed to violate any of these people's First Amendment right to express themselves publicly on a platform that should be treated as a utility. That's not her reaction. Her reaction is, look, if all of these platforms want to get together and say, in good faith, we should not allow people to have access to our platform if they're violating whatever we agree should be the standard that has nothing to do with law, I would get that. That's just common sense censorship. Cue the laughter. How are you quoting this person as a serious liberal, as a serious progressive? Again, would you apply that standard to the Nazis marching in Skokie when the ACLU famously defended them, much to the chagrin of many of their big Jewish donors? What are you doing? What is this garbage? I have to end my video. I mean, there's more, but I just don't have time to go through all of it. But her reaction here is so telling. This is fake liberalism. This is pure establishment politics disguised as liberalism, disguised as progressive ideas. But it's here to make you realize that essentially no one can protect you, so you better run to the establishment. We better work with the establishment, within the establishment. Let's have the established websites set up rules, which, by the way, probably no one will be able to adhere to because it's not a free market and they can establish rules. Let's have Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube get together and make one clear, consistent set of rules that they will follow. I don't even know how to respond to this. But it's really sad that people think this stuff is legit. Have a great day. This is Laser Weiss. This video is too long. I can't believe I made an hour-and-a-half video. I'm ashamed of myself. If you're still watching, please like, share, and subscribe. Despite the fact that this video is too long, I really feel a need to make content like this. I'm going to try and pare my stuff down, but this video evoked a powerful reaction from me with its insane lies. Obviously, there are nuances where I might be wrong. There are moments where you might say, "Oh, you made this point, but did you consider this? And this guy did something worse, and they broke the norms in this way, and that was a norm. And what about this? And what about the fact? And Donald Trump broke the norms when he spoke a certain way, but I was only talking about legal norms. But da da da. Yeah. Sure, but the overall message here is consistent. Common sense censorship is something that's not only okay, but should be promoted. And the establishment is bad, but we should tell the establishment to get their game together and be even more establishment-y, but in a way that's clear, and even more restrictive, but consistently. And forget about the free market because it doesn't work, so let's restrict that market even more. That's the message here. And if that's liberalism or progressivism, and if Saagar is a conservative, I don't even know what that word means. So that's my take. Anyways, please leave a comment. Please like, please share, please subscribe, please whatever. And also, please pray for me that I never make a video this long again. Thank you so much.